Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to Your Voice, Our Morrisville. The podcast where community comes first, and your voice is helping to shape the future of Morrisville. I'm Amy Wuelfing, I'm your host, and today we're kicking off an important conversation. Who's really running Morrisville Borough? And what does good local government actually look like? And joining me right now are two people who care deeply about this borough and about making Morrisville work for its residents. And that is Council candidate Shawn Ratti from the First Ward and Council candidate Deborah Colgan from the Third Ward. So welcome to you both, Shawn and Deborah.
Thanks for having us, Amy. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Amy. It's good to talk about this. A lot of people are asking about it.
Okay, so let's get right into it. What is a borough manager? What does a borough manager do? And what happens if we don't have one? So directing this towards you, Shawn, can you break it down for people? Like, what exactly does a borough manager do?
Sure. A borough manager is basically like an executive director of the borough. So they aren't elected, they are hired, and their job is to carry out the decisions made by the elected council. And I want to emphasize this point. He is hired and works with the elected officials. This means that they are making sure departments run smoothly, projects are staying on track, and the day-to-day things in business for the borough are actually getting done.
So let me just repeat back to you what I heard. So they are not an elected official, they're hired. They don't actually make the laws or make the codes or enforcement, but they make sure that those things and decisions are actually put into practice.
Exactly. So they do things like supervising staff, they manage the budgets, they keep things moving, and they act as the go-to person for both residents and council members with any concerns or questions they have on policies and enactments.
And I think it's important to point out that a good borough manager brings professionalism to the job. I mean, they know municipal law, permitting, how to work with contractors, engineers, grants, and it's not about politics, it's about operations. They work with council regardless of who the residents elect. It's their job to make sure that that the local government runs.
Okay, and so just so I understand, right now in Morrisville, we really don't have a borough manager, or that we're kind of borrowing a borough manager from another borough, like, and he's working part-time. So I mean, if he's working part-time, he's obviously not giving all of his attention to Morrisville. Would that be correct?
Right. And it's not his fault, but it's not working. I mean, some things are functional, but other things are disjointed and uncoordinated, leading to missed opportunities. This is a full-time job that needs full-time leadership.
Okay, and then so going back to him being hired, under Pennsylvania law, it's not as though a council member can also be the borough manager. They really need to be two different people because it's two completely different positions. And that's not just, a best practice, that's the law. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's spelled out in the municipal code that council members set the policy and they vote on the decisions, but they don't run the day-to-day operations. But in Morrisville, we're seeing a lot of impressions that this is starting to cross the line.
Okay, and when that happens, when an elected official starts acting as a de facto borough manager, I'm guessing it just creates confusion that there's liability risks, legal risks, real problems for the residents of the borough. I mean,
Very
so
much.
thinking about that, recently Morrisville just sort of enacted this rental inspection program. So now that we understand what a borough manager should be doing, like, let's talk about what's actually going on right now, kind of boots on the ground here in Morrisville. Because as I understand it, what we're seeing isn't professional management. It's sort of confusion and frustration and some missed opportunities. So Shawn, let's start with the rollout of the rental inspection program. Can you just sort of give me a like a high level, like what happened there?
Yeah, so I think the best way to describe it really is that it not just it was a mess, it still is a mess. Keeping in mind it's only been enacted for a couple of months and there's a lot of problems still happening. So the goal behind the rental inspections, which is to make sure there's safe housing, that makes sense. But even with the best intentions, a lack of functionality creates more problems rather than solutions. And the way this was rolled out, it just created chaos. The program was launched so suddenly that residents and landlords had little time to understand what was happening. The letters went out that were meant to collect data, and they were sent out just a short while before the program started rather than months in advance. And in fact, they're resending them out because they still haven't gotten the information they're looking for.
So as someone, I own like one rental property in Morrisville. I remember getting that letter, and it was like, yeah, it seemed to come out of the blue and kind of left scrambling, and sending in the $100 and then waiting to find out when or if this inspection would happen. It just felt very I don't want to say slapdash, but it felt a little bit that way. So I wasn't the only one who was left scrambling.
Exactly. So it pretty much all felt rush and arbitrary. And that's kind of what this has turned into. The council right now is taking the time to blame a previous council for developing this idea. But then this idea sat on ice because they didn't have a realistic way of implementing it. And then now suddenly this current council has decided they're going to resurrect it, but without actually following through with any good guidelines to get it started. So they can point the blame the old way, but the problem is they're the one enacting it. They're the ones setting the standards. They're the ones setting the policies. All things that is within their hands, and they have decided. So once this rolled out, staff wasn't even prepared to answer the questions. And when people called the borough, they're just getting bounced around. No one had clear information, and it wasn't until the complaints came into the code inspector, that he was even brought to the borough council during a meeting to be able to answer questions because I was there, and he was just like, well, it seems like it's a little better if I get out here and actually talk with everyone to figure out what's going on. But that was after the program started. It was such a late way to address the problem.
So was the council involved in approving any of this? Like, it sounds like maybe there was too many cooks in the kitchen, or maybe there was no one person in charge.
No, from whoever when we talk to on this matter, and that's the problem, is that all these rules and standards and expectations were not voted on. It's not 100% clear as to who decided them and who's implementing them. We know they come from examples of other townships, but it's still kind of picking pieces from different councils, from other boroughs that we saw. And this wasn't at all strictly voted upon. Council didn't vote on the mailing costs for all this, the enforcement procedures, and the potential impact it had on residents. And to make matters worse, that letter that was sent to renters wasn't even signed by borough staff, because a lot of us had seen it, and it was signed by the council president herself. And that's highly unusual, and it blurs the line between governance and management.
Right, okay. So I'm starting to get a better idea of that. Um, so moving away from the rental inspection and sort of moving back over to the Morrisville Library. So let's turn to that example. So Debbie, a place that people really rely on, especially families, is the library, for programs as well as resources, computers, Wi-Fi. Can you just give us an update on what's going on over there?
Yeah, it's been incredibly frustrating. We've seen confusion around staffing, missed opportunities, a lack of follow through, all of which it could have been avoided with proper coordination. At one point, the library lost a phenomenal children's librarian, not because of pay or performance, but because she was a great fit, but because no one followed through to followed up on her application for a full-time position. She did not even receive a response from the borough manager.
So she applied for this position and the borough just ghosted her?
Yeah, that's right. And it's not just hiring that we're seeing, it was communication too. We had council members making announcements about funding and partnerships before the library board or the library staff even knew what was going on. And this undermines trust and creates chaos.
Okay, and so in the midst of all this, the council president has also been involved.
Yeah, and this is where it really crosses the line. The council president has gone into meetings and reminded very strongly to the library board members that they have no decision-making authority. And at the same time, she's involving herself in operational decisions. That's not collaboration, that's control. And it's demoralizing for staff and volunteers who are trying to serve the community.
Wow. And this is especially disheartening because I know that some programs are being threatened or delayed.
Yeah, exactly. There were threats to cancel children's programs. First, because the borough was unwilling to fund them and forced outside sources to be found instead of the government that runs the library actually covering them. And then a second time, after a key staff member left, and before reaching out to the other staff to cover the programs. So, and these were programs that were already funded.
Okay. All right. So we're hitting all the hot issues here in Morrisville Borough. And the next one is one that I have witnessed firsthand that I'm a little baffled by. And that is the Morrisville Senior Center parking lot. That parking lot has been deteriorating for a while. There's been cones up and the yellow caution tape, and then you have seniors going there. You have people who are, need to use walkers or need to use other, devices, and you have this parking lot that's kind of public hazard. So I know that this is creating a safety issue, and the Manor Park Playground is right there. And at the beginning of the year, hazardous areas were blocked off, and it hasn't really been any movement since then. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the plans to address this issue were an issue because they were just so convoluted. Residents that I've spoken to on many different occasions have told us that they're hearing and being told one thing directly by certain council members. Then other residents are hearing and being told a different set of instructions from another. Then we're hearing a third variation from the actual board meeting. And those answers are ranging from it's not something we're going to deal with or a problem to we have to look into it and figure stuff out about it before that's possible to oh no, we've already had a solution going. So just all over the place on these answers, but none of it has come from the borough manager, who's supposed to be the one coordinating this stuff. We've known for years that there were multiple factors impacting this parking lot while they were planning the cloverleaf remediation, and even while they've been working on that new playground. And the blame before was an argument of ownership. But I know for a fact that we've known about the ownership of the property for quite a while. And when this issue was brought up, a lot of us already knew who owned it and who was responsible for the repairs, and that is the borough. So, but without a manager to properly coordinate this stuff, we allowed a comprehensive solution to just be delayed over and over. And we're still looking for that solution now. And if this was really that important, then safety should have been the concern from the beginning of this, instead of these long delays and these mixed answers from everyone. And all instead we got was a lot of unaddressed concerns from residents for months.
Yeah, and being a lifelong resident of Morrisville, I can't help but think if this was Lower Makefield or if this was Yardley, we would not have these issues, or we would not be dealing with a parking lot that's sort of um, a hazard like that, and not really being touched for well over 6 months. So we're talking about some examples of like deeper structural problems, the rental inspection, library, parking lot. And I don't know that I don't think these are just isolated missteps, just a few things that kind of reflect a deeper, maybe leadership or management problem in Morrisville. I know that we're operating without a full-time manager, and that sort of void or vacuum is affecting how the entire system functions. So you guys are running for council. You guys are out there, knocking on doors, talking to people. So throwing this over to you, Debbie, like, what are you hearing? Like, what are you hearing when you talk to people when you're out and about?
Well, what we're hearing is that there's a growing sense that the borough lacks direction. Without a full-time manager, there's no consistent leadership. to coordinate operations or provide clarity. Residents describe confusion, delays, uncertainty, not just on big projects, but even on routine manners like scheduling events or understanding how decisions are made. It's very hard to get anything moving through the borough now.
Right. And these aren't just administrative hiccups. These are symptoms of a system without proper structure. And we've seen issues get bogged down and politicized simply because no one whose job it is to manage things is doing so professionally or even consistently. And it isn't a knock necessarily on Jim Dillon, who's our current uh, part-time borough manager. He simply just doesn't have the time or the capacity to be able to do what this borough needs. This is why we hire someone who is exclusively working for the township, not individual people, and who is working for the betterment of our town instead of trying to juggle multiple things amongst multiple townships. So we deserve to have someone who is dedicated full time to the Morrisville Borough and can give us that full attention so our needs can be met.
Okay, well, I think that it's made it, just these three issues that we talked about have made it abundantly clear that we definitely should have a full-time borough manager. That Morrisville is sort of operating in this kind of limbo gray area where no one's really taking responsibility, no central coordination. And it sounds like we really need to start the search for a full-time borough manager, like now.
Yeah.
And now I know on the MorrisvilleDemocrats.org page that there's a blog that people can read called "What Does It Take to Manage a Borough?" That sort of breaks it down even further. And we're going to continue this talk in our next episode where we kind of dig a little deeper into those blurred lines, especially this huge sort of overarching question is who's making the decisions right now and who's really managing things right now. In the next episode, we're going to talk about some legal overreach, the role of the council presidents, what it means for transparency, those types of things. So this is part one, and stay tuned for part two, where we're going to talk about these a little bit more. As always, thank you for listening to Your Voice, Our Morrisville.